One of the worst pieces of advice I've ever heard is to not tell your goals to anyone, to basically just not speak your goals. And I think me being in Kyoto, Japan, like this year and last year, is kind of the highlight for me that shows me why it's such bad advice. So last year, when I went to Kyoto and stayed here for about 4 to 5 months for language school, I basically didn't really speak about the things I was trying, my goals, all my project stuff in general. I didn't speak about it much unless like I really got to know someone and we eventually became good friends and inevitably I talk about it. This time around, I stayed for about like 30 days at this point, and I've already met a lot of other like creators and a lot of other people in general that have like really inspired me to try harder with the things that I'm doing, and also just like meeting people who helped me make those connections in the first place. So to be specific, the story is basically I met a friend last year, and this year we connected a lot more. And at a certain point during a hike at Mount Hieizan, I was just telling her about my goals and like just how I really want to meet more creative people, how I really want to like do these things regarding like YouTube or like creating an audiobook or just a whole bunch of projects that I have in mind, and story stuff as well. And like it turns out, she's also a writer, and we talked about just writing and stories in general a lot, and it was so fun. Like some of the most fun I've had in conversation in a long time. And then eventually she introduced me to like this sort of open event that you can go to in Kyoto, where I ended up like playing some mahjong. It was like an event where we played mahjong at first, and so what happened was I met, like by accident, I mentioned this in a previous video, like this indie creator, like indie developer who's made like games that have been sold to like Ubisoft and stuff. And at first I had no idea who he was. I was just like, talking, and he was teaching me basically everything about mahjong for the specific Japanese version, which is like Rishi Mahjong. And I was a complete beginner, so I was kind of lost, and my brain was like really focused on trying to learn. And he taught me so much. I was like calling him sensei and everything. And eventually, when I learned more and I could talk more, and I was just asking, what do you guys do? I ended up talking about my goals. I ended up talking about how like, oh yeah, I do YouTube. I'm trying to like grow on YouTube. I'm trying to do more of certain things. And I asked about them. Like, I'm trying to meet more creative people. Like, oh, do you guys do anything creative? And he ended up telling me, yeah, like he's done so many creative things. It's like kind of his whole life. And that's when he showed me like a video of him having created this whole like automatic mahjong, like playing AI machine thing that he used to basically rank up in this online mahjong game, which I thought was like crazy because it was like a real physical like machine where like it was poking some inputs on like I think the iPad or something, and it's also AI in that like it's trying to win. So yeah, it was really cool. Like honestly, my mind was blown at that point. I was like, what the heck? Like who am I talking to? Like how did they create like such a really cool device like this? So that happened, and I still didn't know who he was at that point. But after like talking to him a lot, he asked me if I wanted to go to an event the next day, like just telling him my goals and everything. Like, oh yeah, like I want to meet more people like that. Like he invited me to the next thing, where I ended up meeting a whole bunch of creators for not YouTube, unfortunately, but it's still a bunch of people who create things like mostly games. It's mostly for games. So I ended up meeting a lot of people who do that, who create games, who create like art assets for games, who just everything related to games. But like that in itself is already like very cool and is very creative as well. It's like definitely a creative field for sure. So I was very happy that I got to interact with a lot of people who were new. And that in itself, it's like a place where you basically have to talk about your goals, or at least the things that you're doing, because at that point you're like at a networking event. So to me, the whole thing about like not talking about your goals, not like saying what your goals are and all that stuff, it's kind of like terrible advice. I really don't think that there's a point in listening to that advice. I feel like back then, like I considered listening to that advice a bit more because it felt like it had some good reasons. It was like, oh, yeah, if you talk about your goals too much and you're not like actually trying to like you're talking about it, you're getting that excitement of talking about it, but you're not actually making progress towards it. So you end up like staying still, like because you feel good about it, even though because you just talked about it instead of actually working on it. But like to me, that's such beginnerish stuff. It's like nobody actually. I don't really think that's actually a thing that affects me at all. Like I feel like in general, like when I talk about my goals, all I get from that is excitement. And at that point, I'm most likely already working on the goal anyways. So it's like kind of weird to me that it's a big enough thing that I've seen some of my friends talk about how like, oh yeah, they don't want to say their goals because otherwise it might not happen or something like that. But to me, it's like, it just doesn't make sense. Like just talk about it. Like you end up finding people who resonate with your goal or helping you like connect with other people that also resonate with your goal. Like there's so many more good things that can come out of it compared to like just keeping it a secret or not saying anything about it. And there's also this, especially like for YouTube, when I talk about the things that I'm doing, I feel a sense of accountability. Like I feel like I want to accomplish my goals a bit more because like I'm talking about it, and I would basically sound like someone who I'm walking a route that I'm not usually used to, so I'm like trying to dodge cars. Okay, but when I talk about my goals, I feel like I have to accomplish them because otherwise I will feel this dissonance in my head. I'll feel like, okay, I'm just someone who's just talking. So that's how it affects me, and that's why I think like talking about your goals is a good thing and not a bad thing, and why I think like people who say that it's like to not talk about your goals, that's why I think it's like bad advice. Like definitely some of the worst advice I've personally heard, but I know it's different for everyone. I know that everyone is slightly affected differently by, you know, speaking about their goals, and there are different stages and whatnot. So take it as you will, but that's how I personally see it. And that's just the quick story as well behind me like realizing that talking about what I do and what I like to do has way more positive impacts in my life personally that I'm seeing. I ended up getting to meet, like I said, that indie creator, a lot of game developers, a lot of artists. And I know this is kind of like the first step for me as well. Like I'm not used to those events, so I definitely had to like get out of my comfort zone a little bit and just try to talk with new people. Talking to people is not that difficult for me personally, but like it's like kind of interesting. It's like when you meet people, you talk and then you feel fine. But like when you're at an event where you know you're meeting other people who are like creators or like my goal, which is to meet creators, it's like I become a bit more nervous, a bit more like, oh, I gotta actually like come into this conversation with something to offer, and a lot of other things like similar to that in that way. So that's a big difference, I think, and I'm trying to resolve that in my head. But I think that's it for this one. That was just a somewhat of a redo for me talking about the story of how I ended up meeting a really cool indie creator, and how like all that, like basically it all started from my friend and just like talking about goals, and then just getting invited to things, and then meeting someone cool, and then meeting more cool people, and now me telling about it. But yeah, I tried basically telling a similar version of the story previously, and I think that unfortunately, I, I think I basically told the story in another way that could have been a lot better. And a part of me feels like the environment around me definitely caused some like distress, just because there was a lot of noise and I ended up walking around an area I'm not familiar with. So I'm like, where am I going? And the noise definitely also made me kind of like, oh, the audio quality is going to be bad. But it is what it is. I think we'll just end that story with this. But I hope you guys got something out of this video. Like, I really do believe in just, you know, talking about what you care about and what you love, what you want to try to do, like, and also be working on it at the same time you're talking about it, right? If you can do that, that's obviously way better than just talking. But the only instance where I can see that being a bad thing is if you have no intentions of actually doing it. So as long as you have that intention and energy and desire, like talking about it is totally fine. That's my thought though. That's it for this one.